Yes, ladies and gentlemen, I would like, first of all, to thank you for being here and to thank Middays for organizing this interactive debate session on a very important and vital sector in the region's economy. As it's well known, the tourism sector has grown rapidly over the past 20 years in the Mediterranean countries. Performance varied between one country and the other, that's right, but the fundamental fact remains that the sector collectively contributes to an average of 10% of the GDP and provides destination to over 30% of the world's tourism and employs directly and indirectly some 20 million people in the region at the time unemployment is reaching its peak. The fastest pace of growth is also expected to be in the southern and east Mediterranean basin, supported by undeniable factors that were naturally granted to this part of the world: climate, landscape, tradition and heritage, and geographical proximity of commercial areas, all combined together to give the sector its uniqueness. The international and domestic tourists are expected to reach over 600 million by the year 2025, up from about 294 million international tourists received by the countries bordering the Mediterranean in 2007, prior to the economic crisis, and generating by then over 183 billion euros in revenues. The past couple of years had been really tough, slowdown in the global economy, especially in Europe, which is facing its worst economic crisis ever. Fuel price fluctuation and the implications of Arab Spring almost everywhere. Despite all of this, the sector in many parts of this region showed resilience. Here in Morocco, for example, the sector managed to register 2% growth over the last year and witnessed 4% increase in its revenues. Most of the countries have already adopted ambitious strategies to lure investments into its real estate and tourism sector. However, are these strategies enough? What policies should be adopted? What funds are needed? How should the private and public sector join forces? What are the consequences of the latest challenges? And what the developments that happened would impose on the sector? And most importantly, how environment-friendly and sustainable are the investments that are taking place in this part of the world? In this session today, we will try to address these challenges and go over them with our panelists, and we will try to have an interactive debate that hopefully we can answer all these questions. I'm pleased to welcome the panelists for today, and I will start welcoming Mrs. Zeljka Skaricic, Director of the Coastal Management Center, PAP and RAC, and His Excellency Mr. Lahcen Haddad, Tourism Minister of Morocco, and Mr. Campbell Thomson, Tourism Advisor at European Investment Bank, and Mr. Christopher Hinteregger, Head of Department International Projects at Kohl and Partner Hotel and Tourism Consulting. And finally, I would like to welcome Mr. Klaus Lengefeld, Senior Advisor Sustainable Tourism at GIZ. We will start by a brief presentation from each one of the panelists, and I would like to invite Mr. Lahcen Haddad to start, please.
Thank you, Maya. First, I would like to just express my gratitude to Middays for organizing this panel, a very important panel. I would like also to thank them for organizing this event on a yearly basis, which is crossroads between different panelists and speakers and people with different ideas. This is a real event on an international level, organized by young people who are very dynamic, who are also very motivated to share ideas and also to learn from different speakers, from different panelists. So I really would like to thank them and commend them for the great work that they are doing. And we in Morocco, a lot of people support this event and think that this is a great event and it needs to go on and needs to continue. Let me just give you a brief idea about the importance of tourism sector in Morocco. You know, the tourism sector contributes between 8 and 10% of GDP in Morocco. So it's the second contributor to GDP after agriculture. It's also the second employer with about 470,000 people that are employed in the tourism sector. And it's also the first contributor to foreign currency entry into Morocco. Sometimes it's the Moroccans living abroad and sometimes it's tourism, but over the last 2 years it's tourism. especially with the crisis in Europe and also the remittances from Moroccans living abroad going a little bit down. So it's tourism sector which actually contributes mostly to the level of currency in Morocco. It's also, in terms of revenue, last year in 2011, it was between 5 and 6 billion euros that the tourism sector has generated in terms of revenue. And it's a sector that is called upon to grow, and within the Vision 2020 that Morocco has put together, one of the things that we are aiming to have is to draw as much as 150 billion dirhams in terms of investments, which is about 14 billion euros, and also to make tourism contribute to the economy by something like 12 billion euros a year, which means like it will gain 2% in terms of contribution to GDP by the year 2020. So it shows that it is a very strategic kind of sector. It is a sector that is called upon to develop tremendously. And in Morocco, we would like to do that by first creating more territories, more destinations, because our most dominant destinations are Marrakesh and Agadir. Agadir is a seaside resort, and Marrakesh is cultural capital of Morocco, and in a sense we would like to diversify that and then create 8 territories for tourism with regard to 20, by 2020, and at the same time diversify our cultural offer so that it's not only based on Agadir, and create more bed capacity with regard to the seaside. I will come back to the Vision 2020 later, but what I would like to say is that tourism is very important for Morocco. It's very important for the economy of the Mediterranean countries, and as such, it's a sector that is called upon to face quite a few challenges in the future. And some of these challenges have to do with investment. And investment is a very important element in tourism because it's highly capitalistic kind of undertaking. It's highly capitalistic kind of mission. But in these days, and starting probably like about 4 years now, the investment in tourism has known quite a few difficulties and quite a few challenges. One of them has to do with the fact that because of the volatility that exists in the financial markets, then a lot of investors are taking refuge in treasury bonds and not in capital investment. And that means like there is not much liquidity in the market in terms of capital investment. That's a very important problem, and we need to understand that and work around that. I think the second one is that a lot of governments borrow as well in order to fund either social programs, to respond to political situations like what happened in North Africa and the Middle East. They also, some governments on the European side of the Mediterranean also borrow money in order to bail out different sectors, whether the banking sector or bail out countries in this kind of situation. In that sense, they contribute to the lowering of the liquidity that exists within the financial markets, and in that sense makes it difficult for investment, especially in a sector that is highly sensitive and also that is long-term like tourism. The other thing is that a lot of people think that sovereign funds could be like a solution for a lot of problems that the tourism knows, especially that sovereign funds, especially from Gulf countries, from some Asian countries, have this kind of long-term view of development of their financial portfolios. Yes, that's true, and there are possibilities and there are ways in which we can get into some of the sovereign funds in order to tap into the big capital that exists there, but they are also very conservative about how much they do, and some of them also take refuge in treasury bonds and money markets, which are also in small and short-term and medium-term gains rather than long-term gains which come from investment. I think that the other thing also that is contributing to the difficulty of drawing investors to the sector of tourism is that some of the austerity measures taken all over the world, especially in Europe, but also in some countries this side of the Mediterranean, but also in some of the leading economies of the world, meant that the austerity measures contributed as a negative factor to economic growth. I mean, they are very important, they are needed. It's good that there will be a balance in terms of budgets. I think like very highly deficit. I mean, high deficits are not good for a lot of different countries. But at the same time, I think they have contributed to the slowing of world economy and to the fact that we don't see much in terms of growth over in the near future. And I think the most important thing is that banks prefer, with a lot of problems that exist now within tourism, but also other sectors of the economy, a lot of the banks, and I speak about Moroccan banks, but it's true also of other banks in the region, they prefer mostly consumer loans because consumer loans are more guaranteed, consumer loans are short and mid-term, rather than tourism loans or loans in sectors which are longer term, and therefore there is, because of the problems that a lot of investment projects in the region have known, especially in the tourism sector, a lot of the banks have put like a hold on investing in tourism, on financing tourism, and have resorted mostly to either treasury bonds or to short-term consumer kind of loans. So the banking system is also nervous about investing in tourism. So to conclude from this, what do we need to do with this kind of situation? I think one of the things we need to do is diversify different kinds of resources, diversify resources. I think that investment in equity is very important, but I don't think we should go only to specific kind of capital funds in order to tap into equity. I think we need to go to the financial markets. I think the retirement funds is a very important source also for funding, especially in terms of equity. I think also we need to develop the financial products that also make people and make institutions contribute to forming capital funds. For example, like hotel ownership is very, very important problem that exists within Morocco, exists within other countries. There are very good examples in Spain, there are very good examples in France where specific kinds of firms, which are financial firms, have developed through the financial markets in order to help with investing in ownership of hotels. I think that's one problem. The other thing, I think governments have no choice but to contribute to equity in some of the projects that are high kind of projects, high profile projects, what we call in Morocco les projets structurants. Why should government do that? Because that will give a guarantee to investors. It also helps investors. It gives a sense of, it gives some sort of reassurance, and it guarantees that the government can monitor the development of those kinds of projects. That's what we are doing in Morocco with all the big resorts that have known problems over the last 10 years that we were developing on the seaside, in Saidia, in Taghazout, in Mogador, in other places. The government now is coming in with specific fund, but we don't go beyond 25%. This is not a sign that we are giving that the government is nationalizing investment, but it is one way for government to say, yes, we are here, and reassuring the investors and reassuring also the banks that the government is. And once the government is in there, I think there is more also confidence that is built from banks, from different kinds of capital investment. The last point, I think that it is very important that investment should not be only highly capitalistic. I think investment in tourism should also bring in the small business, small initiatives, medium and small businesses. It's very important. I think we need to create the whole network of small initiatives, and therefore there should be funds allocated by government, allocated by different kinds of initiatives, allocated by international development to promoting the small initiatives, because those small initiatives are the backbone of tourism, are the backbones of democratizing tourism in a sense, are also one way in which we can create like a dynamics of economics around tourism, which are not only highly capitalistic. And in order to create a weight or create a balance between big projects and also small scale kind of projects. I think we need to invest in small initiatives, in youth initiatives, in community initiatives regarding tourism. That's the social economy of tourism is very important. And the last point is, of course, the sustainability of all of that. I think we need to weigh investing and also what kind of impact we should have on the ecosystem and what kind of impact we will have on the resources. I think sustainability should be worked out throughout the way, should be in the business plans of all the kinds of products that we do. I think I will stop here and maybe we'll have a chance to say more.
Thank you, Your Excellency. Mrs. Zeljka, please.
Thank you very much. I would like to start by thanking the organizers for having me invited to the forum. And this is really important because I'm not a person that comes from the business. I'm not the person that comes from the tourism sector, but I'm more than concerned by the field of expertise I can provide by the tourism development, as I'm working in a center of the Mediterranean Action Plan of the United Nations Environment Program, which deals with coastal management. So, obviously, tourism and coastal management, those are two things that are closely linked because of the impact of tourism on coastal zones, not only on the environment of the coastal zones, but also on the socio-economic sustainability of coastal zones. In dealing with tourism, within the integrated coastal zone management, as we call it, we always like to point out one thing, that a difference should be made between growth and development. Growth is something that is seen as growth in number of tourist visitors, in number of beds, but development implies a strategic planning, sustainability, of course, and really strategic planning, which is based on the carrying capacity of a destination. Carrying capacity that, again, is not only the number of beds that will be offered to visitors, but also the social carrying capacity, the way that tourism will impact a destination by making changes in social patterns, by making changes in economical patterns, etc., etc. So this is really important for this, what we are doing, the coastal zone management. Another thing that is important, when I was preparing myself for this session, which is about real estate and tourism, I realized that in many scientific literature, in many research projects, there is always the same statement made, which is if there is a boom of real estate, if there is a boom of mass tourism development, that means that something is wrong at the level of planning, at the level of tourism planning, at the level of land use planning, at the level of general development planning. And this is where the approach that we are following by integrating sectoral policies could change a lot, could contribute a lot, because you cannot plan a tourist destination without planning in an appropriate way or the development of infrastructure, of waste management, of sewage systems, etc., etc. So this kind of integration and harmonization of strategies and development plans is really the target of the integrated coastal zone management. And at the end, I think that we shall enter more into detail about the real estate and tourism advantages and disadvantages. I would just state that newly adopted legal instrument of the Barcelona Convention, which is the 7th protocol, which is dedicated to integrated coastal zone management, is something that we hope will change the way that management of the coastal zones, and this includes also the management and development of tourism activities and tourism industry in general, that will change the way how the things are done. I'm very happy. This protocol entered into force last year in March 2011 after 6 needed ratification by the Mediterranean countries. And I'm very happy to announce that Morocco has just ratified and that the protocol is in force starting from 21 of October this year. So this common obligation, this is a legally binding document by which some order will be put in the way that coastal zones are planned, that coastal zones are managed, and which will allow new systems of governance, especially because we have to know that governance is one of the important things in coastal management, but also in tourism. I mean, decisions cannot be made only at national level. While developing coastal zones, while managing coastal zones, it is important to listen to the local population as well. This is something that we have seen in many, many, many occasions, that destinations that are not sustainable, they are not sustainable because there is no satisfaction, not only by the visitors, but also by the receiving population, which does not have enough profit and enough satisfaction from this kind of activities. So I will stop here. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Zeljka. And now I would like to invite Mr. Campbell Thomson to give his presentation, please.
Oops, right. Sorry. My name's Campbell Thomson, and I work for the European Investment Bank. For those who don't know the European Investment Bank, we are the promotional bank of the European Union. We are a company, but our shareholders are the member states of the European Union. And over the last 5 years, we have lent on a long-term basis into the southern Mediterranean round about 7 billion euros, which is quite a lot of money and makes us the biggest long-term lender, or the biggest supranational long-term lender. So we lend more money in the region than the ADB or IFC, for example. Now, obviously, tourism is important for us. Otherwise, I wouldn't be sitting here. And it's important to us because it's a key economic activity for the region. Now, we finance tourism projects directly out of, on a one-to-one relationship. We also fund tourism projects indirectly, small projects, through financial intermediaries that we have in most of the countries around the southern Mediterranean. And in fact, one of our intermediaries has a stand outside, BMCA. However, we don't just finance tourism projects. We also support a lot of the infrastructure that goes behind the tourism. So we've put money into energy, into water, wastewater treatment. We've put money into transport infrastructure, etc., etc. Because if you don't have that, it's very difficult to get the tourists in and keep them happy. However, as part of a wider process in tourism, we don't just lend money. We like to know we need to understand tourism in the region. So for that reason, we've been involved in studies relating to both national tourism projects and sustainability of tourism as an economic activity across the region. Now, what we can say is that, yes, the southern Mediterranean is a great place for tourists, and tourists offer great economic benefits, particularly if you get the backward linkages right, the backward linkages from the tour operators back into the hotel, back into their suppliers, back into the agriculture. Those backward linkages provide a lot of the economic benefits in tourism, and they're usually underrated. However, we are possibly less sure about whether some national policies adequately reflect international tourism market realities, and whether the tourism policy priorities are really sustainable. Now, when we talk about sustainability, people think sustainability, well, that might be environmental sustainability. But it has to be more than that. We are a bank, so we have to be interested in commercial sustainability and financial sustainability because we want to get our money back. In fact, we have to get our money back because the way the EIB works is we borrow in the world capital markets, we add a margin for our costs, and we lend. However, because we are a public institution, effectively, financial viability isn't enough. We also need to have economic viability, which raises an interesting question because, to start with, the title here involves tourism and real estate. And I said we do finance tourism, but we don't finance real estate. We don't finance speculative real estate because we're a long-term lending institution, and speculative real estate only needs short-term money, unless the speculation isn't very good, in which case the short-term money suddenly becomes very long-term money, and the banks aren't happy. We also don't finance second homes, for example. That sort of real estate has no economic value whatsoever, and second homes represent a drain on the economy, a drag on the economy. However, that's what we don't do. We'll stick with what we do. Now, when we talk about tourism policies, I said that we had some doubts. And if we consider first the question of growth, one of the problems across the region is that almost all countries say they aim to achieve above average growth rates. Is that realistic? Can every country be above average? Probably not. Secondly, they often base their growth rates on world averages. And there is the question, is the world average growth rate the same as the growth rate from the inbound markets that they're addressing? And the answer is not usually. How often, if you go to a lot of conferences, you will hear a lot of people talk about China. So China, lots and lots of growth, huge amounts of growth, especially in tourism. Is China a realistic target market for the Mediterranean countries? And people are saying, yeah, no. Maybe in 10 years' time, maybe in 20 years' time, but not now. If you look at China, there is only one non-Asian country in China's top 10 outbound destinations. Only one, and that's Russia, its next door neighbor. So, you know, are tourists going to overfly lots of destinations to come to the southern Mediterranean? There may be something to bring them, but the numbers are still probably too small. Do long-haul Chinese tourists at the moment look for the traditional Mediterranean product or even the new Mediterranean product? Cultural tourism? Not really. At the moment, the numbers of Chinese tourists in cultural tourism is very, very small. Right now, where Chinese tourists are going is London, Paris, Milan, and New York. So you can work out the reason yourself. So we also have a question about competitive analysis. But I'll leave that in case it comes up later. Question of sustainability. I said we did consider environmental sustainability. And there is a tendency across the region to emphasize high value added tourism rather than simple beach holidays. It's no longer the traditional 3S holiday, sea, sun, and sand. It's the 3 Rs, rounds of golf, relaxing in spas, and ruins to be visited. But if we could focus on golf, mainly because I'm Scottish and I know about golf, how can you guess, just think in your head, a golf course, how many hotel bedrooms does a golf course support? How many hotel bedrooms do you need for a golf course? Assuming that somebody plays maybe 3 times during the week and only one golfer in the room, you need 150 beds. you need 150 rooms, right? I know that there are developments in the Mediterranean which focus on the availability of golf for their 5,000 rooms. Now, there is a mismatch there. 150, 5,000. There is a mismatch. A single round of golf, sorry, I'm moving on now to think about climate. People come here because of the sun, right? It's warm, it's nice, right? It's better than the east coast of Scotland. I admit that, right? But one of the differences between Scotland and Morocco is that we've got quite a lot of rain. We have no shortage of water. And in a semi-arid country, especially in the summer, a single round of golf by one person uses as much water as a local resident needs for a whole year. One golf course equals a town of 20,000 people. Now, you might say, oh, well, that's okay, because we've got recycling systems where we collect water, the grey water from the public system, we filter it, and we use that for irrigation. Do you know how many permanently occupied homes you need for that to be viable? The answer is 15,000. If you're going to collect it from one of these tourism developments with real estate, where the people are only there for 3 months of the year, then the figure goes up to about 45,000. That's per golf course. However, tourism offers huge economic benefits to the region, but the industry needs to be able to offer stability in the destinations. You know the numbers yourself from the last 2 years. It needs to offer reality in the products and marketing, and it needs to offer sustainability and land and resource use. Now, I'm just going to finish with a small advertisement. The EIB is sponsoring or managing a conference on the 27th of November on vers un tourisme durable en Méditerranée. There should be some of these up at the back of the room. Please don't go and get them now. Wait until you've finished.
I would not like this.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Campbell. I would like now to move to Mr. Christopher.
Thank you very much, Maya. A warm welcome also from my side. My name is Christopher Hinteregger. I work for Kohl & Partner. Kohl & Partner is an international tourism consulting company. So basically what we are doing is helping project initiators, developers, but also public administrations to develop tourism products or projects. So this could be either in the hotel segment, but also in the destination development segment, and also tourism infrastructure and development we support. Currently we do projects in Russia, for example, in Kosovo, in Iraq, in Azerbaijan, and of course in our core market, which are the German-speaking countries. When I read the topic of this panel, which is what investment strategies for the Southern Mediterranean, I thought there are two possible ways to see it. Either from the side of the private investor, but also from the side of the public administration. What can they do in order to attract investors? So when you look on it from a perspective of a private investor, what are private investors searching for? What do they need in order to find a place attractive for tourism investment? The first thing is definitely they need to have legal security. That's the most important issue. In Croatia, for example, we know cases of Austrian investors. They were there, they acquired the land, they bought the land, they developed the project, and then during construction somebody said, okay, but you know, this land does not belong to the one who sold the land to you, it belongs to somebody else. Okay, so the development stopped, and the investor, after fighting through the courts, left the country after 1.5 years. So that's definitely not a good thing. And you know what happened afterwards? The media coverage in Austria saying Croatia does not like Austrian investors. Although, it's not Croatia, but it was a particular case where some competitor didn't want that this project happen. So this was the reason why. And, I just take it because I know from this example, it doesn't mean that Croatia is extremely negative in this regard. It's just an example. The second thing is you need to have a minimum of bureaucracy. I can tell you the example of Russia. In Russia, for example, when you want to construct a hotel, you need to get 45 to 50 permissions on the way to construct the hotel. The problem is that you're not getting the certificates and permissions at the beginning, and then you are secure for the whole process. No, after a few months, another few need to be issued, and another few. And in a country like Russia, where it's sometimes difficult with topics like corruption, this opens the door, for public authorities saying, no, you cannot continue with this project. So we had cases where our clients, it took them more than 2 years or 3 years to finish a construction they have started. So that's definitely also another thing that needs to be taken into consideration. The third thing is that if you take a destination and the investors like if there are public development plans for this destination in place. As the minister Haddad said before, if there is support by the public administration and they kind of signalizing that they also invest into those projects that are maybe not really feasible economically, like the promenade or this general tourism infrastructure projects, then of course it's more attractive for investors to go there because they see the destination is moving. Also the state has an interest or the public administration has an interest in the development of this destination. And then, of course, the fourth area is incentives for investors. There are different possibilities. It could be that there are like tax reductions. It could be that they set up special economic zones. The Russians, for example, did this for tourism. It could be that there are heavy subsidy programs for tourism development. So all those kind of things together give incentives for investors in order to try, from a destination point of view, a public administration point of view, to attract those investors that are out there on the market. Because the reality is there are not that many investors waiting out there with money. So all the destinations are somehow competing against each other. So all the countries try to attract the investors, but it's difficult, especially in our times. So those are the 4 points I think that are very important for try to attract private investors. If we now see it from a destination point of view, we have seen a lot of things happen in the last 50 to 60 years, mostly in the northern Mediterranean countries, that destinations should try to avoid when they develop their tourism product or try to develop tourism in general. The first thing they should avoid is to have no management of the tourism development. A good example of what happens if there is no management for tourism development is the example of Albania, the Albanian coastline. What happened there a few years ago is everybody was able to build illegal buildings there, and they just took the land next to the coastline. So what we had there were dozens or hundreds of buildings that were illegally there at the coastline. The second thing is when you go to a destination like Durrës, which is only half an hour away from the capital of Tirana, you can see that there are one apartment building, selling cheap apartments for the summer vacation, and then 5 centimeters next to it, another one. And this approximately 10 meters away from the beach and from the, from the sea. So this is not what tourism development is all about. This does not create atmosphere. This is not touristic development. So definitely, especially when we talk about coastal development and the development of mass tourism in coastal areas, management is very, very important. About sustainability, we have already heard a lot. I want to add one more thing. Of course, everybody of you know the example of Spain, this unsustainable development in the 70s, one building after the other, way too much supply, and especially the brand and the image of Spain at that time was not very good. I mean, they changed their marketing strategy and their campaigns in order to do something against this image, but still the development that took place there was not really good. So we raised already the question, what happens if a destination is not an emerging destination anymore, but a developed one? How long can we continue to develop supply? How long can we develop hotels? How long can we develop more beds, more rooms? There needs to be a certain limit. Otherwise, you know, the competition will grow, and in the end, there will be a fight for customers through prices. So I want to mention one example of the Italian province of South Tyrol. They have a very sustainable way of developing tourism, although, of course, you cannot compare it with the mass tourism at the coastline. But still, every municipality in South Tyrol was forced by law to define the maximum amount of beds in their municipality. And with this maximum amount set, it was not possible for new investors to create new beds, additional beds. Only if one of the old existing ones disappear from the market, new project would have been possible. Or conversions, of course. But they set up like a maximum capacity, which is something like this carrying capacity, what we mentioned before. This is the very important issue. The third thing is, when you look at it from a destination point of view, is you should avoid to develop without authenticity. If you just try as a destination to copy another destination, you will always be second. The most important thing when it's about tourism development is to create a certain brand, a certain image, a certain USP of the destination. If you are not able to do this, what will happen is you can only win through price. So you have to have the lowest price in order that the people really go to your destination. The fourth thing is you should try to avoid unrealistic visions or unrealistic expectations regarding tourism development. I had a case when I worked for a Russian destination a few years ago. They have hardly any tourism there. It's very difficult for them to develop tourism because they are very remote in Siberia. But they told me at the very beginning, we want more than 7 million international arrivals every year. And you are there as a consultant to help us do this. So, it's not possible. Sometimes you have to say, you need to stick to realistic goals. They have potential. I mean, Russia is a big country. There are not so many tourism destinations developed there. So if you start to focus on the domestic market there, oh, yeah, tourism will be successful. It will be a success story for them. But, to create something out of the world and think that we can create Dubai in Siberia, this is not possible. And what is even more strange when it's about the development in Russia, they always think that it will be done completely by private investors and not like in Dubai with also a lot of state support. And the last thing I want to mention is you have to set certain limits when it's about tourism development. So it's very, very important if you focus on one product at the very beginning of the development stage, that you diversify the tourism product on the way so that the people are able to spend more money in the destination and that you try to attract more people and give them motives of coming to the destination. So it's not only about selling one product and then, continue, but also try to diversify. But the important thing is to do it step by step. Whenever we do tourism master planning in a destination, some of our clients, they say, okay, and now, what are the 1,000 things we need to do? And say, okay, we can tell you what the 1,000 things are maybe lacking or what is not, what can be improved. But you need to focus on a few things first that are really essential and not try, lose your track on the way. So first, try to develop those things that are really good already and show the biggest potential, and then continue to develop further areas that also have definitely the chance to be developed, but maybe not try to do everything at the same time, because then you will be not so successful. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Christopher. Mr. Lengefeld.
Good afternoon. First of all, I want to say thank you for the organizers for inviting me and inviting me representing my organization, GIZ, formerly known as GTZ. We changed the name nearly 2 years ago because we fusioned with other organizations in Germany. It's not very common that an organization, a development cooperation organization like GIZ, is on such a panel on real estate and tourism. And there are some reasons why I'm here and some reasons why I would not be here if it were only for the development cooperation of Germany. The first reason has to do with the Mediterranean. In the late 80s, there was a planned investment in eastern Turkey in the Dalyan Bay by DEG Invest. DEG Invest is the development cooperation bank for the private sector of Germany, like EIB. They are co-financing investment projects that bring sustainable development. And there was a Turtle Beach next door. And you can still find on the internet the wave of protest. Even David Suzuki from Japan pronounced himself against this project because he said, how can development money destroy the last turtle beach in the eastern Mediterranean? This is the one version of the story. The other version is, if you look into this issue now, the best protected turtle beaches are where tourism and hotels are there and taking over the responsibility of making this a tourism product. You have it in Costa Rica, Tortuguero, you have it, I've seen it in Robinson Nobilis in Turkey, Marriott Phuket has a program with WWF. So this is the two versions of the tourism story. And I started, the second reason why I'm here, because tourism, therefore, was falling out of grace for the German Development Corporation. So there was a moment when we got money from the German ministry. We are working for the Ministry of Cooperation, the BMZ, to get us out of the news in that time. And then they said, no more tourism. However, tourism reappeared, first of all, in biodiversity.